thank you so much for joining us with Joy in the Breakthrough. We're so excited to have our guest today, Stephanie Morimoto. Stephanie has had a large impact on my life as I was facing a burnout last year. And you know, what I love about life is finding new friends along the journey of life. And Michelle Obama talks about this in her book, Setting Your Kitchen Table. I've talked about this in our last episode. And Stephanie is one of the newest members of my kitchen table. And when I heard her story about facing burnout, pivoting to the wellness space, and how you overcame so much in your life and different barriers, I knew that you had to be on our show today. I knew that you found joy through your breakthrough. And so Connie and I are just so excited to have you join us today. And I know Connie is going to read a little bit about you and all that you've achieved.
Absolutely.
And as we talk about wellness and rest today.
Well, welcome, Stephanie, and welcome everyone to Joy in the Breakthrough. Our theme today is about wellness, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stephanie, and then you're going to tell us more about your journey and what you're doing today. So Stephanie Morimoto is owner and CEO of Asutra, a health and wellness company, where they're focused on helping people take care of themselves on purpose. Asutra offers natural remedies for pain relief, sleep, and mood. Asutra, and I really like this, is women-owned and women-led. 60% of the team are people of color. Stephanie is a graduate of Brown University. She spent more than 5 years as a development officer for the Teach for America organization, then served as Chief External Relations Officer and co-CEO for New Leaders, an organization that recruits and trains school leaders who focus on improving education results for poor and minority students. She's also a board member of Hope Chicago, which sends students and their parents to college debt-free. Very Asian Foundation, which amplifies AAPI stories. Naturally Chicago, which creates an ecosystem for natural products, companies to thrive. Global Cosmetic Industry, which delivers forward-thinking insights for product and brand innovation. And Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network. With all of that, I know you stay well because you practice what you teach. And we are just so delighted to have you with us today, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to kick off with what Connie always asks our first guest. Tell us who's Stephanie. Tell us about who you are and what makes you who you are.
Yeah, I love this question because I think in our culture, we so often think about what we do, not who we are. And yet it's so important to really reflect on who are we, who do we want to be in this world? And that was something that I had to learn the hard way, right? I was conditioned to think about my accomplishments, to achieve, to feel valued because of what I did and how productive I was. And it took a lot to then shift that mindset and say, okay, who I am and who I want to be in this world is actually what matters the most. So I would say I aspire and practice every day to be a good family member and a good friend, to be a good leader and to be a good colleague. And I am so grateful that I think at this stage in my life, I've been able to integrate who I am with what I do every day, and that I get to live my purpose and my passion, really helping other people recognize the importance of self-care and well-being through Asutra.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Excellent. I like that too. You once said, and this is one of my favorite quotes, I was doing research and just learning more about you. You once said, I wanted to do work that honored what I had learned by prioritizing my wellness and joy. How do you define joy and how do you define wellness?
Yeah. I think joy is that moment when you're just in flow, when you realize that you're following your bliss, right? When you lose complete track of time because you're engaged in something that feels so good, feels so natural that you don't want to stop doing it, right? And I think, again, as we just talked about, because we're so focused on productivity, on what we do equating to our worth as a human being, we sometimes forget about that. We focus on all the tasks, all the emails, all the meetings, all the chores that we need to do, all the other people we need to take care of. And sometimes it seems like self-care is selfish, but I really think it's important.
Yes.
You have to carve out time to do the things that bring you joy, because that's what refills you and allows you the energy to do all the other things that you want to do in life. And then for well-being, you know, for us at Asutra, for me personally, it really is about being holistic. It's mind, body, and soul. So how do you make sure that you are taking care of your body at the fundamental level? You have to do that, whether it's sleep, movement, nutrition, hydration, but also mentally and spiritually. How are you taking care of those things? making time for joy is a part of that, right? And some of the physical well-being or self-care practices help too. When you sleep, when you rest, it helps your mind, it helps your soul. But also spending time with the people that bring you joy and love and laughter, or whether it's your faith or spending time in your community and giving back, those things really rejuvenate also.
Excellent.
Well, what I love is all the things that you say I need to incorporate in my life. If I sound a little different today, listeners, I had a tonsillectomy almost 2 weeks ago. And I'm okay today to speak, so don't worry. I am going to go back to resting today and tomorrow. I'm taking the rest of the week off. But I know that you suffered a burnout. And you had a couple of pivot moments that made you break through to joy. Can you share with our listeners? Because I think your story is so powerful. And I know it impacted me into really looking at my life the last year, how I was going to show up and how I was going to not be selfish, taking care of myself, especially as a new mom. I know moms listening, we feel that guilt. If we want that extra time or walk alone in the morning, we feel that guilt on it. So tell us a little bit about how you navigated that when you faced burnout.
I think there are a couple of pivots in my life. The first was definitely the burnout moment. So Connie, you mentioned my all the different things I've done professionally in my life, including spending 12 years in the nonprofit education space. And while the missions of those organizations were so important to me, I grew up in Joliet, Illinois, going to public schools that were mediocre at best. And I was really fortunate to get into Brown. And then I got there and realized, oh, wow, a lot of other people in this country had access to a totally different type of education than I did to prepare them to be here. And I had thought about all the classmates who didn't get into Brown, right? Who didn't have somebody to encourage them or support them to get into a great college and use that education to create a better life. So that's what really drove me to be in education. And as you can probably relate to, when you spend your days working on a mission that's so important, sometimes that takes over.
Yes.
And if it feels like every minute you're not working on the mission is another kid who's not getting a great education, another family who's not getting access to what you hope they get access to. But unfortunately for me, that led to burnout, right? I was working 18-hour days. I was traveling across the country constantly. I was not eating nutritious foods. I was not moving my body. I didn't have any time or even the energy to do things that really brought me joy. It was just work, work, work. And I hit a wall. And I actually walked into the president's office and said, this is not sustainable for me. It's not sustainable for the hundreds of people on my teams. We have to change the way we do this. And the response was, we've got to grow. We've got to advance the mission. We're not going to change the way we do things. And I looked above me and I realized all the people that were working in superior levels to me were doing the same thing. They were burning the candle at both ends. And I thought, I'm not probably going to be able to change this culture, but I can create a better and different culture if I run my own thing. And so I left my job.
So scary.
Yeah, I left my job.
And we don't advocate that. You did it with a plan, I'm sure.
Well, actually, I did it with the plan of giving myself a little bit of time off to reset. And actually, I promised myself I would not commit to another job right away because I needed to rediscover who I was. And that inspired me to embark on this 10-year wellness journey. I didn't take 10 years off, but it took me 10 years to really figure out the things that I needed to have in my life to truly take care of my well-being on purpose.
You've said so many things so far in our conversation, and I want to come back to a couple. One of the things you said, this notion of what we do is who we are. I've often said that, and that net worth is not the same as self-worth. And how we create those cultures for those individuals who are in organizations where they know what wellness looks like for them is very different than the culture in which they find themselves, and they may not have the ability to move quickly. And we're going to do tips and techniques certainly, but what were some of the things you did as you thought about how you could move away from this culture? How did you evaluate when it was time to go even? And what could you do while you were there until you left to maintain your own state of health and wellness?
It's a great question, and people ask me that a lot. And I love what you just said about our net worth is not our self-worth. And I think that relates to the top thing I always say, which is you have to know yourself. You really do have to spend the time on self-discovery and self-knowledge. And you can do that any number of ways, right? A lot of people like to journal and reflect on different questions. Some people like to talk to someone else. I'll be honest, for me, therapy was a big part of it. I found an incredible woman therapist, and she helped me ask these different questions and really get to know who I wanted to be in the world and where I was at that point, and the journey I needed to go on to get to where I wanted to be, and also to realize that that journey is ongoing. One technique I also like is what I call the enjoy, annoy technique. It's super simple. Spend 1 week, take out your phone or your notepad, and write down every single thing that you did that week that you really enjoyed, and every single thing you did that week that annoyed you. And at the end of that week, I guarantee you will see patterns, right? You'll realize, oh, I really love spending time with people, or I really love coming up with new ideas. And I really don't like it when I have to sacrifice my sleep for an early meeting, or when I don't get to brainstorm with other people. Whatever those things are, and then make those tiny changes. Pick one thing on that annoy list and figure out, can you cut it out of your life?
And that may include people.
Yeah, it might include people. Yeah, that you need to let go.
Hi, I'm Darius Hillman. Joining me on the next edition of In the Arena, the Grand Marshal of good, spicy kitchen table talk, our Chat Daddy Sims.
Fame is something that people just don't understand. Fame is something that will open doors for you. Fame will allow you to talk to people that you may never have been able to talk to.
Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CanTV 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the new CanTV Plus app.
If I could just do a quick follow-up to that, when you talked about the way that you did that, a couple of things that it brought to mind for me was the approach of this whole notion of busyness. People say, what are you doing? I recently rewired, and the word is rewired, not retired, because I wasn't tired and wasn't going back to anything. So I rewired. And there's this whole value that's put on being busy. And what I say to people, I'm focused. So tell us how we can help unravel this notion of rewarding busy, the tyranny of busy, I'll call it, and just figure out what works for us and be about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is why when I was fortunate enough to leave my job, that is why I gave myself a little time to do nothing. Because I knew I needed that reset. I was so used to being in meetings from sometimes 5 or 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, right? And then emails and follow-ups all in between and before and after, and cooking dinner, doing all the things. And I realized I needed to just relearn, to your point, that wasn't the way to live. I didn't have to be occupied and busy every single minute of the day. It was okay to have maybe at first 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then over time, 2 hours or 4 hours where there was nothing on the schedule. And that was okay. It was okay to get bored. It was okay to feel uncomfortable with that boredom and the lack of schedule. And that is where you really do find yourself too. As an entrepreneur, I'm really intentional about talking through success without the hustle. Because I think the other thing we see a lot is if you're going to be successful, you have to hustle all the time. And actually, you don't have to. You can build a great team. You can define core values that create a culture where you can lead with purpose and calm, which I think, Connie, I know in your long career, you did a lot of that.
And with love.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, with love.
It's not a popular thing to say in business, but those who know me, it is. It's okay to lead with love, and the kind of love that respects and honors the individual. It's okay to do that.
Yeah.
I think as women of color, you said so many things that I need to hear today for me. I think when I was facing burnout last year, I didn't see the red flags, or I rushed past them. Because as a woman of color, you feel like you have one opportunity, or at first in your family, to go to college, to hit success, right? And to hit those marks and to outmaneuver everyone else. And you have to prove yourself 10 times harder than your white male counterpart. And it's just truth, whether in your new business in the wellness field too. I know there's not a lot of women of color in this space talking about rest, because there's this guilt again that we don't give ourselves permission to take the rest. So how can you tell our listeners when they see those red flags, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And how can we give ourselves that permission? How did you start to give yourself permission and kind of overcome some of those barriers in our mind? And then the real barriers within society, because society is not there yet in a lot of cultures. So people who aren't their own boss or entrepreneur and have to be in these cultures, advice to them as well for these flags and how to kind of mentally overcome it.
I think often today self-care has become commercialized in a way where it's about go to the spa or do a facial or take a bath. And look, those are all great. Self-care to me is not about that. Self-care to me is about intentionally carving out the time to take care of your mind, body, and soul on purpose. You know, Audre Lorde has that quote that self-care is about self-preservation and it is a political act. And I fundamentally believe that is true. We, as women of color in particular, we have to take care of ourselves on purpose, because if we do that, we then have the energy, the patience, the creativity to be better family members, to give back to our communities in the right way, to create the change that we want to see in our teams, in our companies, in our culture, in our neighborhoods. But we're never going to do that if we're exhausted. Yes. So that is sort of the first big call to action, I would say, is that's why it matters. That's why we have to do these things, even when it feels really hard. Practically speaking, you know, for me, it was, I wasn't sleeping enough, but even when I slept, I'd wake up and feel exhausted, right? I had chronic lower back pain. I had constant stomach aches and digestive issues. I would get headaches out of the middle of nowhere. You know, a lot of physical manifestation, because I think that's what our bodies are smart. They tell us when we're not doing the right things for our body, our mind, and our soul. It shows up in that physical stuff. So I was just sick all the time and I was in pain all the time. And for me, a part of the reason I wanted to build Asutra was that I started using magnesium, which is one of our key ingredients, and it literally changed my life. I mean, topical magnesium has helped me change the way I manage my pain. And when we're not in pain, we're able to focus on all the other things that helps us. So I would say watch out for those signs. Do you have a lot of physical ailments? Do you feel irritable or impatient, kind of for no reason, right? Do you feel like maybe you just don't want to get out of bed in the morning, or when you do get up, the last thing you want to do is whatever is first on your list? You know, those are signs of burnout. And we talked before about, okay, so what do? You know, you're working on a team at a bigger organization and you aren't in charge of the culture, you aren't in charge of the priorities. But we talked about knowing yourself. Know both what you need to feel joyful, but also what are the limitations and boundaries you need to set, right? What is important to you? And I always say, do one thing. Pick the one thing that you think is going to be most important and have the biggest impact, and try to, you know, ask your manager, hey, can I change up this one thing because it's going to help me be more productive? You know, you probably have to speak in that language, be more productive, do my work better. And I think when you approach it that way, you know, unless you have the worst manager in the world, most managers will say, okay, let's talk about that. Let's figure out a way to make that happen.
I think we've seen trends, though, and certainly from my corporate experience and as an executive, I was the manager, I was them. And so being intentional about that allows the people that we're leading or who are working with us to be truly who they are. A lot of the wellness things that are coming up in corporations, that you have quiet rooms. We started that through our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
We need nap rooms.
All of those things, but really to think about what that means for us. And I think as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to practice that. And like you said, do one thing. My one thing was, you know, becoming skillful at listening, because that allows us to just relax into who we are without judgment. And that means listening, not waiting to speak. And I love what you said. So I would say to all the leaders who have large teams, you can set that practice no matter where you are in the hierarchy. Do one thing, whether it's being listening well, or just showing some compassion. That's helpful too. We all have power. We just need to know how to use it and leverage it in the right way.
And you have power wherever you stand.
No matter what.
No matter what title. Because you own your own body, and your mind and your emotional health can be yours to control. No one else can take that away from you. And I think it takes a while, though, to realize, I know I'm just stepping into that power, even as a leader, and to model that for my team as well. At the end of the year last year, I had people who did not take enough vacation days. They were going to lose them. So they were all trying to cram vacation days at the end of the year. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And my COO, who he is like the best work person ever, great attitude, but he was losing his days. This year, he's taken multiple vacations. And at first, I was kind of like, where did he go? Where is he? And they're like, he's on vacation. I'm like, okay.
That's it.
It's fine. And we're all running fine without him. So I'm happy it's modeling now.
That's the modeling. But the other thing you said that triggered for me was this whole notion of, I always say that our bodies won't believe our minds lie.
Yep.
Your body is telling you you're tired, you need more sleep, the headaches, and you're saying, I'm fine, it's good. But our body doesn't believe the lie that our mind is telling us. And so, I take my Asutra iPad.
I love that you use that sleep mask. Sleep is so important.
Sleep mask is so important. Well, tell us a little bit about sleep and the importance of it.
Oh my gosh. Everybody asks, as an entrepreneur, how do you stay rested? How do you take care of yourself on purpose if that's what you're doing for your business? And my number one tip is always sleep, right? Sleep is so critical. And I had to learn that. I talked about how I wouldn't want to go to bed at night because I was working so many hours that I felt like I just needed some extra time for leisure, but that cut into my sleep. And then I learned to sleep, which maybe sounds funny, but I learned to do what I love to call a power down hour, which is an hour before bedtime to signal to your mind and body it's time to calm down, it's time to relax that fight or flight response, and it's time to get ready for bed. And I learned that through a sleep doctor. I was listening to a sleep doctor talk, and he said, you have to prepare for sleep just like you would prepare for a big meeting or a presentation or, if you're an athlete, a game. And I love that. So that has become my superpower, I would say, is sleeping. I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. And whenever somebody asks me what's the one thing I can do differently, I ask them about their sleep.
I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to take our tips and techniques where we give our viewers, our listeners, one tip or technique. And mine today is blank calendar space is set up for failure. If you have blank calendar space, other people can steal your joy, hijack your priorities and your energy. So I actually put on my calendar rest time, off time, days off, so that I know that those are my times to sleep, play with my daughter, or do anything that I want to do and spend that energy. Connie, what's yours?
So mine, and talking to Stephanie really brought this home for me, was to think about asking good questions. I always talk about good questions and asking the questions. And mine, the first one is, and I had read this somewhere, how do I want the world to be different because I live in it? And how do I want to be different because I live in the world? Asking those two questions gets me more centered in my joy, because I can do that list of what works or what doesn't work for me. I ask myself those two questions every morning before prayer meditation time for me and journaling. And it changes. But fundamentally, it means I'm not going to do some things that are not going to bring me joy or allow me to have the sweet rest that helps me become fully present with the people I love and care about.
And now we're going to go into Say Less with the Connie Lindsey. We know that she always gives us that word, that phrase, that saying less can say more.
So today, as we talk about rest and wellness, I read and I truly believe that health is a state of body and wellness is a state of being. So I want our listeners to consider and think about very much, certainly our health, the exercise, hydration, all of the things that keep our physical presence well and able to do what it is we're called or believe we need to do. But the wellness, the things that we talked about today, having time for yourself, the connection of mind, body, spirit, all of that is important. So find one or two things that allow you to think, how am I going to eat differently, hydrate, or whatever it is that's going to keep you strong and healthy physically. But the wellness piece, having that calmness in your mind that allows you to rest, to give yourself permission, not judgmentally in any other way, but just to be able to rest, remembering that health is a state of body and wellness is a state of being. I wish you rest.
Thank you so much for joining us and join the breakthrough, and we'll see you at our next episode. Yay!